Nice to meet you too. My name is Alexander Smith. I've kept my silence on this issue for a long time. A long time. What I'm about to tell you is something that I haven't even told my children, nor my grandchildren. My own wife doesn't even know what I'm about to tell you. You see, the reason I kept my silence for so long was due to the threats that I got. I suppose my story starts back in the year 1980. I worked for the CIA. I can't give my specific position in the CIA. I was sitting at home with my wife on the couch watching television when I got a knock at the door. I went to the door to answer it, and outside were two men dressed in black suits. When I opened the door, they asked me to come with them. They worked for the CIA. They told me I can't even tell my wife that I was so I left her sitting on the couch. I wasn't to see her for a long time. On the car ride, they explained to me that they can't tell me exactly where we're going. They told me to put on a blindfold so I couldn't know the exact location of where we were going. Eventually the car stopped, and I began to hear helicopter blades going. They told me to keep coming with them, and at the time I was still wearing a blindfold. And soon thereafter we were in a helicopter flying. After what I would estimate would be about 45 minutes, the helicopter landed. They took off my blindfold, and they told me we were in a top secret military base. They couldn't tell me the exact location of where I was. A few different men wearing black suits ushered me into an underground facility at the base. Now remember, I haven't a clue where this base was. They brought me underground. I had to climb down a very long ladder that went deep underground. And eventually we reached the bottom. I looked around and I saw a very long hallway. They told me to come with them down the hallway. Now, having worked for the Central Intelligence Agency, I had a little bit of an idea of what we were doing. You see, back when I worked for the CIA, they were telling me about this one project in which they would test the limits of space and time itself. And they were working with top scientists on how to solve some of the biggest issues facing our Earth. I wasn't exactly sure what, but I had remembered that I had previously signed up. Now remind you, this was around 10 years before. He told me, this is a time machine. Obviously I was in shock. Now, I knew the CIA had developed previous technologies before they came out. It's just how it is. The technologies that you're using right now, like smartphones, they were developed around 30 years prior. That I was going to be the first test subject. I was going to be the first one. He told me there was a high probability of me getting hurt or dying. So upon being put inside the time machine, it was pitch black and pitch silent. I couldn't hear a thing. Eventually, after about 5 minutes of being inside of there, I started to feel lightheaded. And suddenly, there was flashes of bright light that seemed to be inside my own eyelids. And then I woke up. I was lying on a hospital bed, and I was alone in my room. I was alone in this room, and there was a window to my left side. To the left side of the hospital bed, there was a window, and there were drapes on that window. So I couldn't see out it, but I knew it was daytime because there was light peeking in. After looking at the window, I looked right ahead of me, and in front of me was something that I've never seen before. Eventually, a nurse walked into the room I was staying in. It was the first person I've seen after this incident. And she began to explain everything to me. She said I was found on the side of the road, unconscious. She thought I had gotten in some sort of car accident or something, and I told her about my story. I told her what had happened, and she asked me. She said, what was the date in which this happened? And I told her it was in the year 1981. And I'll never forget what she said back. She said, sir, 2118. I think she and everybody else in that hospital who talked to me, they thought I was crazy. They thought I was making up my story. She said, sir, why don't you watch some TV and get your mind off this? So I saw a remote control, different from any kind of remote control I've seen in 1981. On the side, sitting on that glass table as well. I picked up the remote control and there was a power button on the top. I hit that button and the glass that was floating in front of the wall, it turned into a screen. And there was television shows I ain't never heard of playing on that screen. And when I switched to one of the news channels, I read the date. The date read November 17th, 2118. This was hard to believe. It was hard to accept. I thought I was in a dream. And near nobody in the future believed me. I realized I had to get out of this hospital. I was completely fine. I felt okay. So I got out of my hospital bed and I noticed a chip on the bottom side of my wrist. A chip, and what I assumed that chip was for monitoring my heart rate and all the other vitals. So I got up out of my hospital bed and I walked up to the window. I opened the window and I saw a city. It ain't like any other city I've ever seen before. This city was very large. I saw vehicles flying at the tops of the skyscrapers. I had to leave. I had to see what was going on. At this time, I began to accept my fate. I may never see my wife again. So I walked to the door of that hospital room, and I found that it was unlocked. So I opened the door. I was still wearing the same exact clothes in which I was wearing in the year 1981. I walked out of that room and I walked down a long hallway. I noticed an elevator. And the elevator looked nearly the exact same as the elevators that you see today. The buttons maybe looked a little bit more futuristic. But apart from that, it looked like any standard elevator. I got in that elevator and I hit the button to go to floor 1. Apparently I was on floor 6. I will admit the elevator was quite fast and I was on floor 1 before I knew it. The glass doors of the elevator opened and I saw the lobby of this hospital in which I was in. Nearly everybody appeared to be dressed in white. They were all wearing white clothes and they appeared to be looking at me strangely. I went up to the front desk of this hospital and I asked the lady who was standing there, who was wearing all blue. The patients appeared to be all wearing white clothes, but this lady who was working at the front desk was wearing all blue. And it appeared as if all the other hospital employees were also wearing these blue uniforms. Not like the blue uniforms you'd see in a hospital today. They were blue long sleeve shirts, blue pants of the same color. And I asked the lady, where am I? And she tells me, you're in District 508. And I said, District 508, what does that mean? And she says, what do you mean, what does that mean? Well, you're in District 508. I began to question everything. Where was I? I went up to the front of the hospital. I went to the front doors, which was sliding, glass doors, and they open automatically when I walk through. And I saw them, and I realized I was on the outskirts of the city. This city with buildings I ain't never seen before. And I saw a sign saying District 508. And at the bottom of the sign I read in very small text. It said, District 508 of the Yavis Empire. I realized I was not in the United States. I was in a new place. I didn't know what this Yavis Empire meant. But I knew I had to come home. So I walked around the city a bit. It's a very strange city. I looked above me and I could see buses floating in the sky. I wasn't sure about how any of the technology worked, but I saw buses and cars flying in the sky above me. The streets down low were open. You could walk. Anybody could walk, and it was full of pedestrians and people biking, but there was no cars at the base level. All the cars and all the other transportation was above, going in between the skyscrapers. And much of the skyscrapers appeared to be made of glass. They were all very transparent. And they were all very tall. Much taller than any skyscraper you'd see in New York. So I realized I was in the year 2118. I had no clue of where I was, or if I would ever get back to see my family again. In accordance to seeing people walking on the very base level of these streets, which were essentially one giant sidewalk in between all of the buildings in which people could walk on. In accordance to seeing people on these giant sidewalks or streets, I also saw robots. And such robots appeared to be floating a foot or two off the ground. And they appeared to look quite like humans, except they didn't have legs and they were floating up off the ground. I went up to a random man on the street, and I says to him, "You need to listen to me. I know you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, but I'm a time traveler." And he simply says to me, "Okay," as if he hears it every day. And I asks him, "What year was time travel developed?" And he tells me it was developed in the year 2028. 2028, he says. And it says, "No, I'm a time traveler, and I travel from the year 1981. He looks at me strangely and he says, "But they taught me time travel was developed." So both of us were confused. I had to get back. So upon walking around, I went up to one of the robots. And I says, "Excuse me." And it turns around and looks at me. It looked like any other ordinary person, except it didn't have legs and it was floating off the ground. And it turns around and looks at me. And I says, "Excuse me, how can I time travel?" And the robot says, "Well, sir, you need to go to the nearest time travel agency." And I says, "Time travel agency, where can I find that?" And she gave me this little glass tablet type of thing, and it had directions on it. And it was updated in real time as I was walking with it. It had a purple line guiding me to my location, essentially a small nap on a piece of glass, very lightweight. And it also appeared to be scratch resistant. So I followed the line in real time and it brought me down a couple streets. A few blocks away there was this one building, not the biggest building, but still a skyscraper nonetheless. And I read time travel agency across the top of the building. So I went inside this building and there was a man at the counter. I wasn't sure if it was really a man or if it was one of them robots. But the robots, they appeared to talk in the same manner that people do. I couldn't distinguish any one of them robots apart from the people if it weren't for the fact that they were floating a couple feet off the ground and that they didn't have legs. So I asked the man at the front desk of this time travel agency. I says, I need to travel to the year 1981. And he says that'll be $457. To me, the scientists have given me. Nice to meet you too.